After the family reunion, I checked my bank account. It was empty. My son-in-law snorted. "We needed it more than you." My name is Evelyn, and I turned 70 last spring. Until that moment, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold beside me, I thought all the surprising chapters of my life had already been written. I was wrong. The day had started so well. The reunion had been beautiful. We laughed, passed dishes around, and everyone fit for the first time in years. My granddaughter brought a photo album. We cried over old summer pictures, days that felt simpler. It felt good, ordinary, safe. Then I opened my banking app. I hit refresh, because surely this was a mistake. The number on the screen glowed back at me. 0. A string of zeros where my small nest egg used to be. The money I had saved for years, the cushion for my home, my dignity, had vanished. My hands went ice cold. I tapped the screen again, willing the app to correct itself. It did not. The room tilted. A subtle shift when your body recognizes terror before your mind does. My chest tightened. That money was not just numbers on a screen. It was my independence. It was every sacrifice, every small comfort denied, for security in these final years. Nina, my daughter, was in the living room with her eldest. She glanced up, saw the white in my face. "What's wrong, Mom?" she called out. I could not speak. I just held up the phone, my hand shaking. She walked over, looked at the screen. Her jaw tightened, that familiar sign of impatience, as if I had done something foolish. Before I could speak, Derek, her husband, snorted from the couch. Beer in hand, a smirk, the kind of look you see on someone who won a bet you did not know you were part of. "We needed it more than you," he said, almost amused. His tone cut deeper than any shout. The coffee in my mouth tasted like metal. The puzzle pieces blurred. Everything else vanished, except those words, mocking me. "We needed it more than you." For a moment, I could not breathe. The betrayal was intimate, so close it felt like someone had reached inside my chest and squeezed. I sat there trembling. The old instinct to gather my things and flee, to escape the storm, took over. But something else rose in me, too. Something buried under years of being accommodating, of being the family's safety net, of never saying no. My voice, when it finally came, was small but steady. "Then you won't mind what's coming next," I said. They laughed. Derek actually laughed like I had told a joke. Nina looked away, uncomfortable, but silent. My granddaughter, sensing the tension, fidgeted with her puzzle. I did not smile back. I did not blink. The room went quiet except for the kitchen clock. Derek's smirk was still there, but something in his eyes flickered when he saw I was not backing down. Then, a loud bang shook the house. From the back door, the timing was too perfect, like the universe waiting for its cue. For a split second, I thought a branch had fallen. But then the door flew open. Late afternoon light spilled across the kitchen floor, bright and unforgiving. Footsteps, firm and deliberate. Nina's face went white. Derek's amusement froze into something harder, something that looked almost like fear. My granddaughter started to cry. And there, standing in my doorway, were two figures I had not expected. Not yet, anyway. Two city officers stepped inside, badges catching the light. They were not here for tea. The taller one had graying hair, a face that had seen too many difficult conversations. The shorter one carried a tablet and a notepad. Both moved with a quiet authority that filled the room faster than any raised voice. "Mrs. Evelyn. The taller officer said. I'm Officer Rodriguez. This is Officer Bennett. We received a report from your bank regarding unauthorized transfers from your account. May we sit down? I blinked, still clutching my phone. You received a report? Yes, ma'am. Officer Bennett said, pulling out a chair. Your bank's fraud detection system flagged multiple large transfers. They're required by law to report suspected elder financial exploitation. We need to take your statement. Elder financial exploitation. The words landed heavily. Nina's mouth opened, then closed. Derek set his beer down, amusement completely gone. He shifted, avoiding everyone's eyes. My granddaughter buried her face in her mother's side. Officer Rodriguez sat across from me, calm and professional. A steady calm, kinder than any fury. He was here to listen. Mrs. Evelyn, when did you first notice the discrepancy? Just now, I said, my voice shaking. I opened the app after our family reunion. Everything was gone. My savings, my emergency fund, all of it. Officer Bennett tapped notes into his tablet. And how much are we talking about? I told him the number. It was not a fortune, not by some standards. But it was mine. Years of careful budgeting, of skipping restaurant meals and clipping coupons, of saying no to myself so I could have yes when I truly needed it. Nina started to speak before I could continue. Officers, my mother has been a little confused with technology lately. She might have clicked on something. Or maybe she gave her password to someone by accident. You know how scams work these days. The way she said it made me sound senile, incompetent. Officer Rodriguez looked up slowly. His gaze moved from Nina to me. Measuring? Ma'am, he said to Nina, we'll need to see identification and any relevant documents. We'll also need to ask about anyone who had access to your mother's banking information. Anyone who had access? The question hung in the air like a spotlight. Derek stood up suddenly, too quickly. I need some water, he muttered, heading toward the kitchen sink. His hands were unsteady. Sir, we'll need you to stay in the room, please. Derek froze, turned back, his face tight. Of course, just thirsty. I pulled myself together and handed over the information I had saved on my phone. Account statements I kept backed up in the cloud, receipts for regular deposits, and the small spreadsheet I had maintained for years to track my pension and expenses. I had always been meticulous. It was how I had kept my independence. Mrs. Evelyn, Officer Rodriguez said gently, you keep very organized records. That's going to help us significantly. As he scrolled through the documents, his expression shifted from neutral to focused. Officer Bennett leaned over, and they exchanged a glance that said more than words. These transfers, Rodriguez said, they're not random. They're methodical. Regular intervals. Large amounts. Someone used your online banking login multiple times over the past 6 weeks. 6 weeks. My stomach dropped. They also changed your password, Bennett added, looking up at me, and rerouted your account alerts to a different phone number. That's why you didn't receive any notifications. The room went quiet. Even the clock seemed to stop. Nina's fingers twisted together. That doesn't mean... Ma'am, Officer Bennett interrupted, gently but firmly. This level of access requires personal information, security questions, previous passwords, possibly even physical access to documents. This wasn't an outside scammer. Whoever did this knew Mrs. Evelyn's routines, her personal details, her schedule. Derek's face had gone pale. He sank back onto the couch, his earlier confidence completely shattered. Officer Rodriguez looked directly at me. Compassion, or maybe respect, in his eyes. Mrs. Evelyn, this is elder financial exploitation. We see this more often than people realize. And I'm sorry to say that in most cases, it's committed by family members or close friends. People who have access and opportunity. He paused. We'll take your full statement and begin an investigation immediately. My granddaughter started crying harder. Nina tried to comfort her, but her own hands were shaking. As the officers stood to leave, they handed me a card with case numbers and contact information. They promised a fraud unit follow-up within 24 hours. They took photos of my documents. They were thorough, patient, and kind. At the door, Officer Rodriguez turned back. Mrs. Evelyn, I want you to know something. You did nothing wrong. Keeping good records, noticing quickly, and calling this in. That takes strength. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. I nodded, not trusting my voice. After they left, the house felt different, smaller. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and barely contained panic. Derek made a move to say something, but the words died in his throat when he saw the look on my face. Nina stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, one thought kept circling back, sharp and clear. This was not a mistake, not confusion or carelessness on my part. This was theft. It was intimate, calculated, and timed to moments when I would not notice. Someone close to me, someone I had trusted and fed and helped, had methodically emptied my life savings. They had done it on purpose. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Sleep had been impossible. My mind replayed every conversation, every favor, every moment. I had missed the signs. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. If the officers needed a statement, if the bank needed proof, then I would give them everything. I had spent years keeping my finances organized precisely so I would never lose track of my independence. Now that discipline would serve a different purpose. I started pulling files from my cloud storage, bank statements going back 3 years, receipts for every transfer I had authorized, the spreadsheet where I tracked every penny of my pension, every grocery trip, every utility bill. I had always been careful, methodical even, because I never wanted to be caught off guard. The irony was not lost on me. I had prepared for emergencies, for medical bills, for home repairs. I had not prepared for my own family to treat me like an open wallet. As I worked, memories surfaced unbidden. Small moments that had not seemed important at the time, but now formed a pattern I could not ignore. 2 years ago, Derek had lost his job. They needed help with the mortgage. I paid 3 months of payments without hesitation. That's what family does. Nina had cried on my shoulder, promised repayment. They never did. Last year, their car broke down. I covered the steep repair bill. They needed transportation for work, for my granddaughter's school. Derek had hugged me, called me a lifesaver. 6 months ago, Nina mentioned business troubles. I wrote a check without asking too many questions, trusting her judgment. Each time, I told myself it was temporary. Each time, they promised repayment. Each time, the subject quietly disappeared until the next crisis. I had not kept a tally because you do not keep score with people you love. But someone had been keeping score, and they had decided I owed them more. I printed everything I could. The stack of papers grew higher on my table. Account histories, transaction logs, email confirmations from authorized transfers versus the unapproved ones. The difference was stark. Around 8 a.m., I picked up my phone. Robert Chen, an attorney I had helped a decade ago, fresh out of law school. He needed volunteers for a community legal clinic fundraiser. I had organized the whole event from my kitchen, made calls, and gathered donations. It gave him credibility. He had told me then, "If you ever need anything, call me." I called. He answered on the third ring. "Evelyn, is that really you?" "Robert, I need help." His tone shifted. "Tell me what happened." I explained everything. The missing money, the officers, the realization. My voice stayed steady. "Barely. I'll be there in an hour," he said without hesitation. "Don't talk to anyone until I arrive. Document everything, but don't confront anyone. Understand?" "I understand." He arrived 50 minutes later, briefcase in hand. Older, but with the same focused energy. He sat at my kitchen table as if he belonged there and read through every document I had compiled. "You kept everything tidy," he said, a note of admiration. "Good instincts. Evelyn, this will make our case much stronger." Our case. The word settled over me like armor. "What we're looking at here," Robert continued, "is not just theft. It's elder financial abuse. Possibly fraud. Maybe even forgery if they changed passwords or authorization forms. Whoever did this was systematic." He pulled out his phone, made 2 calls. The first to a banking fraud specialist. The second to a private investigator for financial crimes. "We'll file an official report with the bank's fraud department. We'll also work with the police to build a criminal case. But I want my own team looking at this, too, because banks move slowly, and we need to freeze whatever assets we can before they disappear completely." "Can we get the money back?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "We'll fight for every penny," Robert said firmly. "And we'll make sure whoever did this faces consequences. But Evelyn, I need you to prepare yourself. This is going to get difficult. Family cases always do." I nodded. I already knew it would be difficult. I had known the moment I saw that 0 on my screen. Robert spent the next hour going through the transaction history line by line. His finger stopped on a section. "Look at this," he said, turning the laptop toward me. "See these withdrawals, small amounts? $200 here, $300 there. All timed to specific days." I leaned closer, squinting at the dates. "Tuesdays and Thursdays," I said slowly. "Those are the days I volunteer at the community center." "I'm gone from 10 until 3, Robert's expression hardened. "They knew your schedule. They waited until you were out of the house to make the transfers, so you wouldn't get any immediate alerts or notice unusual activity." The realization hit me like cold water. This was not impulsive. This was planned. Someone had watched my routines, learned my patterns, and used my predictability against me. Robert closed the laptop. "Evelyn, we're going to find out exactly who did this and how deep it goes. I promise you that." I believed him. For the first time since seeing that empty account, I felt something other than shock and hurt. I felt resolved. Within 48 hours, things started moving faster. Robert called early Wednesday. "The bank has placed temporary holds on several accounts linked to the suspicious transfers. They've also opened a formal fraud investigation. You should receive a call from their security team today." I did. Patricia from the bank's fraud department spoke to me for nearly an hour, walking through every transaction, confirming what I had and had not authorized. Her voice was patient, kind even, but all business. "Mrs. Evelyn, we're treating this as a priority case. Our forensics team is already analyzing the login data. We should have preliminary findings by the end of the week. Forensics team. The words made it feel more real. This was not just my word against theirs. There would be evidence. Digital footprints that could not be explained away. Friday afternoon. Robert arrived again. This time with David, a digital forensic specialist. Younger than I expected. Maybe 40, with glasses and a quiet intensity. He set up his laptop on my kitchen table, pulled up files that looked like numbers and codes to me. Mrs. Evelyn, David said, I've been reviewing the access logs from your bank account. What I found is concerning but also very useful for your case. He turned the screen toward me. See these entries here? These are device identifiers. Every time someone logs into your account, the system records what device was used, the IP address, and the approximate location. I leaned forward. Your usual logins? He continued, highlighting a section in green. Come from your phone and your home computer. Same IP address. Same location. Very consistent. He scrolled down to another section, highlighted in red. But these logins, a different device entirely, a laptop, and the IP address traces back to a location about 2 miles from here. The timing matches those Tuesday and Thursday withdrawals we identified. My throat tightened. 2 miles from here. That was where Nina and Derek lived. There's more, David said, pulling up another screen. Whoever accessed your account also changed the alert settings. Your transaction notifications were rerouted to a different phone number. That's why you never received warnings. Can you trace that number? Robert asked. Already did, David replied. It's a prepaid cell phone purchased with cash at a convenience store 3 months ago. Untraceable to a specific person, but the purchase location is near your daughter's neighborhood. 3 months ago. They had been planning this. The betrayal settled deeper, colder. This was not desperation. This was calculated. Robert made notes on a legal pad. What about authentication? Banks require security questions for password changes. David nodded. They do. And that's where it gets interesting. The security questions were answered correctly, which means whoever did this knew your personal information. Your mother's maiden name? The street you grew up on. Your first pet's name. I felt dizzy. I had shared those stories at family dinners. During long conversations when Nina was young, I had given them the keys to my own vault without realizing it. There's one more thing, David said, pulling up a scanned document. The bank sent me this. It's a form that was submitted to authorize certain changes to your account. It has your signature on it. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but something was off. The loops were too wide, the pressure uneven. That's not my signature, I said firmly. I know, David replied. I compared it to samples from your other documents. The inconsistencies are clear. Someone forged this. Robert leaned back, grim. Forgery adds another layer to the criminal charges. Do we know who submitted this form? It was notarized, David said, by a notary named Thomas Brennan. I looked him up. He's affiliated with a community club in your son-in-law's neighborhood. They likely know each other. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture I did not want to see. Robert paced to the window. We need to connect Derek directly to these logins. Can we do that? I'm working on it, David said. If we can match the login timestamps to Derek's known whereabouts, we'll have something concrete. That evening, after they left, I sat alone with tea I did not drink. The house was too quiet. Every creak made me jump. My phone buzzed. An email from David. Subject, timestamp match found. I opened it with shaking hands. A screenshot showing a login to my bank account at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. 6 weeks ago. Below it, David's note, cross-referenced with phone records and social media activity. Derek posted a photo from your daughter's home at 11:52 that same morning. Location metadata confirms he was there during the exact window of this login. I stared at the timestamp. I remembered that day. I had been at the community center, helping organize a food drive. Came home around 3 p.m., tired but happy, unaware that while I was doing good for strangers, someone I loved was stealing my future. The evidence was undeniable. Derek had logged into my account from his own home and transferred my money while I was out helping others. And now I had proof. That night, I could not sleep. My mind wandered back through the years, trying to understand how I had become this to them. Not a mother, not a grandmother, but a resource to be drained. I had not always been alone. My husband died when Nina was 16, a sudden heart attack. One day, he was laughing. The next, gone. I became a single parent overnight. I worked 2 jobs to keep Nina in her school, to keep the house, to make sure she did not lose more than she already had. I learned to fix the leaking faucet myself. I changed the oil in the car. I planted a vegetable garden to save money. Every choice was about survival, about giving Nina a stable foundation. When she went to college, I worked overtime for tuition. Not all of it, but enough that she graduated with less debt. I was proud of that. Proud of her. She was smart, capable, and determined. When she met Derek, I wanted to like him. He was charming, attentive, and said all the right things. At their wedding, he hugged me, called me Mom, and promised to take care of my daughter. For a few years, it seemed like he would. But somewhere, the requests started. Small at first. Watch my granddaughter for the weekend? Of course. Lend a little money for car insurance? Absolutely. Help with the deposit on their new apartment? Without question. Each favor felt reasonable on its own. It was only looking back that I saw the pattern. I had been filling gaps for years, patching holes that should not have existed if they had managed their money better. There was the time Derek started a business. I gave him $8,000. It folded in 6 months. He never mentioned repayment, and I never asked, not wanting to seem petty. The vacation to Florida 2 years ago, a much-needed break. Photos of fancy restaurants. A week later, Nina called. They could not make rent. I sent the money the same day. Last Christmas, I quietly paid their electric bill. I wrapped the payment in an envelope, slipped it to her without Derek seeing, because I thought he would be embarrassed. Or so I thought. Maybe he expected it. I had been the safety net for so long that I had forgotten I was allowed to say no. I had confused love with obligation, generosity with surrender. Somewhere in all those years of giving, I stopped asking if they appreciated it. I stopped asking if they even respected me. Lying there in the dark, I realized something else. Derek had not just stolen money. He had stolen the meaning behind it. Every dollar I saved was a choice I made. A meal skipped, a coat not replaced, a trip never taken. That money represented my autonomy, my ability to care for myself so I would not become a burden. He took it as if it meant nothing. The hurt was still there, deep and sharp, but something else was rising alongside it. Not anger. Exactly. Something colder, clearer. Strategy. I sat up, turned on the lamp, reached for my notepad. Robert had given advice. Document everything. Build a legal wall. Do not engage emotionally. Let the professionals do their work. I wrote down every conversation I could remember. Every request. Every promise. Every warning sign. The time he joked about my pension. The time he asked about my will. The time he mentioned adding Nina to my bank account. I had brushed those moments off as casual. Now I saw them for what they were. He had been testing boundaries, probing for weaknesses, laying groundwork. I made a list of witnesses. Neighbors who might have seen Derek, friends who heard about loans, and the bank teller who knew me. Questions for Robert, subpoenas for phone records, tracing the money, proving premeditation. By sunup, I had 5 pages of notes. My hand ached, but my mind felt sharper. The plan was forming. Gather proof. Build an unshakable case. Protect what was left of my assets and independence. Refuse to let their guilt trips derail me. They would try. Derek would get defensive. Nina would cry, beg me to let it go. They would say I was overreacting, cruel, tearing the family apart. But I was done being the person who absorbed their consequences. I was done being the woman who gave until there was nothing left. This time, I would stand firm, not out of spite or petty revenge, but out of respect for the life I had built, the sacrifices I had made, and the future I still deserved. I got dressed, made coffee, and called Robert. I'm ready. I told him. Let's move forward with everything. Good, he said, because we have a lot of work to do. Robert scheduled a meeting at his office. A woman, Dr. Margaret Foster, a forensic document examiner, was waiting. Mrs. Evelyn, I've been reviewing the documents your attorney provided. I'd like to walk you through what I found. She spread copies of the authorization form, my real signature. Document examination is part science, part art, she began. When someone signs their name, they do it with a specific rhythm, pressure, and flow. These patterns are incredibly difficult to replicate perfectly. She pointed to the authorization form. This signature purporting to be yours has several inconsistencies. First, the pressure points. Your natural signature shows consistent pressure. But here, the pressure is uneven. Heavier at the beginning, lighter at the end. That suggests hesitation. Someone is trying to copy what they're seeing. I leaned closer. Second, the pen lifts. You have a distinctive way of connecting your letters. This signature has breaks where there shouldn't be any. The forger lifted the pen multiple times. Can you prove it's forged? Robert asked. I can testify to a high degree of certainty that this signature was not made by Mrs. Evelyn. Doctor, Foster said. I can also tell you something else. The ink. She pulled out a small device. This analyzes ink composition and aging. The signature on this form is approximately 3 months old, which matches the timeline. But here's the interesting part. She pointed to a date. This date was added later, maybe a day or 2 after the signature. Different pen. Slightly different ink composition. Someone signed this form, then came back and dated it to make it appear legitimate. My stomach turned. The level of deception was staggering. Who notarized this? Doctor? Foster asked. Thomas Brennan. Robert replied. We believe he's connected to Derek. Doctor. Foster made a note. I'll need to examine his notary records. If he notarized a document he knew was forged, that's a criminal offense. She gathered the papers. I'll prepare a full report for the court. This should be more than sufficient to prove forgery. After she left, Robert and I met with David again. He had brought his laptop. I have updates, David said. Big ones. He pulled up a network diagram. I traced the money. After it left your account, it didn't just disappear. It moved through 3 intermediary accounts before landing in various places. What kind of places? I asked. A down payment on a truck. Luxury purchases at electronic stores. Cash withdrawals at ATMs near Derek's workplace. And this is the big one. He tapped the screen. A transfer to a business account registered under Derek's name. A consulting company that appears to exist only on paper. No website, no clients, no legitimate activity. Just a shell to funnel money. Robert whistled low. That shows intent. He wasn't just taking money impulsively. He created a structure to hide it. David nodded. And there's more. I got the extended metadata from the bank. Remember those login timestamps? I cross-referenced them with cell tower data. Derek's phone pinged towers near your house on 4 separate occasions when unauthorized logins occurred. He showed us a map with dots. Here, 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 and here. Each time corresponds to a login from that unknown laptop. And each time, his phone was in the vicinity of your home. He was physically at my house. I felt cold. Or very close to it. David confirmed. Close enough that his phone connected to nearby towers. This puts him at the scene during the exact times the theft occurred. Robert was already making notes. This is beyond circumstantial now. We have device data, location data, financial trails, and forged documents. We can build a timeline that shows premeditation and execution. David closed his laptop. Mrs. Evelyn, I need to tell you something. In all my years doing this, I've seen a lot of financial exploitation. Most are opportunistic. But this was planned methodically. Your son-in-law spent months setting this up. The words landed heavy, but I did not flinch. I had already accepted the truth. Now I just needed everyone else to see it, too. That evening, a courier delivered a thick envelope. Dr. Foster's official report. I opened it. Read through pages of technical analysis. At the end, a summary statement. It is my professional opinion. The signature on the authorization form was not executed by Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Further analysis indicates the signature was forged. The date notation was added subsequently, suggesting an attempt to legitimize the document after the fact. Below that, in simpler terms, the signature is a forgery. I set the report down, stared at it. This was the moment everything changed. Not just my word against theirs. Not just suspicion or hurt feelings. Evidence. Undeniable. Documented. Professional evidence. Derek had forged my signature to steal my money. And now I had proof. Derek found out about the investigation on a Tuesday. I do not know how. Maybe Nina told him. Or the bank. Either way, his response was immediate and ugly. He showed up at my door that evening, unannounced. I heard his truck pull into the driveway, engine revving. I saw him storming toward my front door, face red, twisted with anger. I did not open it. Evelyn, he shouted, pounding on the door. Open up. We need to talk. I stood in my hallway, phone in hand, finger hovering over the emergency call button. You called the cops on us. His voice was loud enough for the neighbors to hear. After everything we've done for you. After all the times we've helped you. Helped me. The lie was audacious. You're going to ruin this family, he continued. Nina is a mess because of you. Your granddaughter is crying herself to sleep. Is this what you want? I did not answer. Robert had been clear. Do not engage. I know you're in there. You think you're so smart. Getting lawyers involved. You have no idea what you're starting. The threat in his voice made my hands shake. This was not the charming man. This was someone desperate and cornered. After an eternity, I heard his footsteps retreat. The truck engine roared. He peeled out of my driveway. I called Robert immediately. "He just threatened you at your own home," Robert said, his voice tight. "I'm calling the police and filing for a restraining order tonight." Within an hour, 2 officers arrived. They photographed the tire marks, took notes on everything Derek had said, and assured me they would increase patrols. "Ma'am, if he comes back, do not open the door. Call us immediately." That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every car passing by. The next morning, I found something tucked under my windshield wiper, a note handwritten in messy block letters. "Drop this or you'll regret it." My blood went cold. I took a photo, then called the police again. They came, bagged it as evidence. "This is witness intimidation," the officer said. "Possibly criminal threatening. We're taking this seriously. Mrs. Evelyn." But while Derek's anger escalated, something else happened. Something I had not expected. My neighbors started coming forward. Mrs. Patterson from across the street knocked on my door that afternoon with a casserole. "I should have said something sooner," she told me, wringing her hands. "But I saw Derek at your house several times when you weren't home. I thought maybe you'd given him a key for emergencies, but something about it felt off. He'd be in there for an hour or more." "When was this?" I asked. "Tuesdays and Thursdays mostly. Over the past few months." I kept meaning to mention it. I thanked her, called Robert. Another piece of the puzzle. Derek had not just accessed my accounts remotely. He had been in my home, probably looking for documents, passwords, anything he could use. The next day, Mr. Herrera from 2 doors down stopped me. "Evelyn, I heard about what happened. If you need anything, just ask. And if that son-in-law of yours comes around here again, acting like he did the other night, well, I've got a clear view of your driveway." One by one, people I had lived near for years, but barely knew, began offering support. They brought food, offered to keep watch, and shared observations. It was humbling and heartbreaking. I had been so focused on being independent, on not being a burden, that I had not realized I had a community. David called with news that shifted the investigation again. "I've been tracking the cash withdrawals from those intermediary accounts. Most happened at ATMs. Hard to trace. But I found something interesting. Several larger amounts were deposited into a pawnshop account. Mason's Exchange. About 10 miles from here. The owner has a history of questionable transactions." "Why would Derek use a pawn shop?" I asked. "To hide the money trail," David explained. "He buys something with your stolen money, pawns it immediately, gets cash that's harder to trace. It's a laundering technique. Small scale, but effective. Can we prove Derek was there?" "I'm working on that. The shop should have security footage, transaction logs. If we get a warrant, we might place him there." He paused. "There's one more thing." I tracked the notary, Thomas Brennan. Turns out he and Derek are more than just acquaintances. Brennan was seen meeting with someone matching Derek's description at a coffee shop 2 weeks before that authorization form was dated. A witness remembers them because they were having an intense conversation, and Brennan kept looking around. Everything was coming together. Derek's carefully constructed plan was falling apart. But as the case grew stronger, so did his desperation. And desperate people do dangerous things. Robert moved quickly after the threatening note. By the end of the week, he had filed multiple emergency motions, an immediate freeze on accounts connected to stolen funds, a preservation order preventing Derek and Nina from selling property, and a formal criminal complaint for elder financial exploitation, forgery, and theft. These motions will be heard next Tuesday, Robert explained. The judge will review the evidence and decide whether to grant temporary orders. What happens if he grants them? I asked. Derek and Nina will have their finances locked down. They won't be able to access certain accounts, sell their house, or move money around. It'll put pressure on them to cooperate or face the full weight of the legal system. The hearing was held in a small courtroom. I sat beside Robert. Across the aisle, Derek and Nina sat with their attorney. Nina would not look at me. Derek shifted in his seat, radiating resentment. The judge, a woman in her 60 seconds with sharp eyes, reviewed the documents. Mr. 4. Chen, you're alleging systematic theft and exploitation over several months. What evidence supports this claim? Robert presented the forensic reports, bank records, timestamp data, and Dr. Foster's analysis. He spoke clearly, methodically. The opposing attorney objected, claiming circumstantial evidence. But the judge was not impressed. Your client had access to Mrs. Evelyn's home, knowledge of her routines, and the technical capability to access her banking. The forensic evidence shows unauthorized logins from devices linked to him during times he was verifiably in the area. That's beyond circumstantial. Counselor. She granted the temporary orders, accounts frozen, preservation in place, criminal investigation to proceed. Derek's face went pale. Nina started crying softly. As we left, their attorney pulled Robert aside. We'd like to discuss a settlement. Keep this out of criminal court. Your client stole from an elderly woman. Robert said flatly. There's no settlement that makes that go away. The attorney's expression hardened. We'll fight this. Good luck with that, Robert replied. On the drive home, I felt something loosen in my chest. The legal system was taking me seriously. The evidence was strong. For the first time, I felt like I was not facing this alone. But Robert had one more question. Evelyn, have you had any conversations with Derek or Nina since this started? Anything recorded? I hesitated. There was one phone call about a week ago. Nina called, crying, begging me to drop everything. Derek got on the line at one point. Do you still have that call? Yes. My phone automatically records calls for my hearing aid compatibility feature. I keep forgetting to turn it off. Robert's eyes lit up. Can I hear it? I pulled out my phone, found the recording. My hands shook slightly as I pressed play. Nina's voice came through first, tearful and pleading. Mom, please. You're destroying our lives. Can't we just work this out as a family? My own voice, tired but firm. Nina, this isn't about family anymore. This is about what's right. Then Derek's voice, sharp and defensive. You want what's right? Fine. We took the money. You weren't using it anyway. You live alone in that house doing nothing, while we're out here struggling with real bills, real problems. We needed it more than some old woman saving for what? Another 10 years of existing. There was a pause. I had been too shocked to respond. Derek continued, almost mocking. And yeah, I signed your name on that form. So what? You would have said no, like you always do, when it's actually important. I did what I had to do. The recording ended. Robert stared at the phone, then at me. Evelyn, do you understand what you just gave me? A confession. A complete, uncoerced admission of guilt, theft, forgery, and motive. All in his own words. Robert typed furiously. This changes everything. With this recording, they have no defense. None. Is it legal? Can we use it? You're in a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's admissible. You were that person. He looked up at me with something like awe. This is the smoking gun. Evelyn. This ends the case. I sat back in my chair, letting it sink in. Derek's own arrogance had sealed his fate. What happens now? I asked. Now we prepare for trial. We submit this recording as evidence, and we make sure everyone hears exactly what he said. Robert closed his laptop. Get ready. Evelyn. This is about to get very real for them. Word travels fast in small towns, especially when court documents become public record. By the end of the week, people were talking. I noticed it first at the grocery store. The cashier, who usually chatted about the weather, gave me a sympathetic smile, squeezed my hand. The woman in line whispered, "That's her, the one whose family stole everything." It should have embarrassed me. Instead, it felt like validation. At the community center, the director pulled me aside. "Evelyn, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. If you need time off, we understand." "I don't need time off," I told her. "I need to keep living my life." She nodded, respect in her eyes. "Well, if you need anything, you let us know." But the real shift came when people started reaching out to Robert directly. Mrs. Chen, 3 houses down, called. She had seen a rental truck at Derek and Nina's house 2 months ago, loading furniture and boxes. At the time, she thought they were helping someone move. Now, she wondered if they had been pawning items purchased with my money. The mail carrier came forward with information about multiple packages delivered to their address during the time of the thefts. Electronics, luxury goods. Even the barista, where Derek and the notary met, agreed to a statement. She remembered Derek being agitated, speaking in hushed tones, and Brennan glancing nervously. David compiled everything into a comprehensive file. "This is beyond solid," he told Robert. "Any jury that sees this will convict. Any judge will rule in Evelyn's favor. There's no ambiguity left." Robert scheduled a meeting with the prosecutor, Angela Torres. I went along, sitting quietly. Angela reviewed the evidence with focused intensity. "This is one of the most thoroughly documented elder exploitation cases I've seen," she said. "Usually, we have to piece together bits of circumstantial evidence and hope for a confession. Here, we have everything: the means, the motive, the opportunity, and an admission." "What kind of charges are we looking at?" Robert asked. "Felony, theft, forgery, financial exploitation of an elderly person, and potentially identity fraud. Combined, we're talking about significant prison time if convicted. At minimum, probation, restitution, and a permanent record." She looked at me directly. "Mrs. Evelyn, I want you to know that we're going to pursue this aggressively. What happened to you is not just a family dispute, it's a crime, and we treat it as such." I nodded, grateful, but also sad. This had gone so far beyond anything I imagined that day at the kitchen table. Meanwhile, the social consequences for Derek and Nina were mounting. Nina lost her part-time job after the owner learned about the case. Derek's employer, a construction company, placed him on unpaid leave. Their friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. The social circle they had cultivated turned cold. I heard Nina had been seen crying at the pharmacy, and Derek had gotten into a shouting match at the hardware store. Their carefully constructed life was collapsing. Robert filed the major evidentiary submission on a Monday morning, over 200 pages of documents. That afternoon, a reporter from the local newspaper called. "Mrs. Evelyn, your case has been referenced in public filings. Would you be willing to comment? I hesitated, then thought about all the other elderly people who might be going through something similar. Yes, I said. I'll talk to you. The article ran 2 days later on the front page. Local woman takes a stand against family theft. Elder exploitation case highlights growing problem. My name was in print. The details were public. There was no hiding anymore. No pretending this was just a private family matter. The secret was out, and there was no going back. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I wore a navy dress I had owned for years. Robert sat beside me. Across the aisle, Derek and Nina sat with their attorney. Nina looked like she had not slept. Derek stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The gallery was fuller than I anticipated. Mrs. Patterson was there, Mr. Herrera, and several other neighbors. The prosecutor, Angela Torres, sat in the front row, ready to observe the criminal proceedings. Judge Harrison entered. We all stood. We're here today for the civil hearing in the matter of Evelyn Carter versus Derek and Nina Thompson. She began. I've reviewed the submitted evidence. We'll hear testimony from witnesses, after which I'll issue provisional rulings. Let's proceed. Robert called David to the stand first. David explained the digital forensics in plain language, walking the court through login timestamps, device identifications, and location data. Charts mapped Derek's movements against unauthorized account access. The correlation was undeniable. In your professional opinion, Robert asked, could these logins have been accidental or coincidental? No, David said firmly. The pattern shows deliberate, repeated access during specific windows of opportunity. This was intentional and planned. The defense attorney cross-examined, but David held steady. Every question was met with clear, factual answers. Next came the bank's fraud investigator, Patricia. She testified about the alert rerouting, password changes, and transfer patterns. She confirmed the bank had flagged this as elder exploitation. We see these cases frequently, Patricia said. But this one stood out because of how methodical it was. Whoever did this understood banking systems well enough to cover their tracks temporarily. Dr. Foster took the stand after lunch. She brought enlarged images of the forged signature. The differences between my real signature and the forgery were projected on a screen. This signature was not executed by Mrs. Evelyn. Dr. Foster stated, it was copied by someone with access to samples of her genuine signature, but without the natural fluidity and pressure consistency of her actual handwriting. The defense attorney tried to suggest the differences were minor. Dr. Foster shut that down. In forensic document examination, these differences are substantial and conclusive. This is forgery. Then Robert played the recorded phone call. The courtroom went silent as Derek's voice filled the space, admitting to taking the money, justifying it, and confessing to signing my name. His words hung in the air, damning and irrefutable. Nina's face crumpled. She covered her mouth, tears streaming. Even their attorney looked uncomfortable. When the recording ended, Judge Harrison sat back, her expression harder. Miss Thompson, she said, looking directly at Nina, you're listed as a defendant. Do you wish to testify? Nina's attorney leaned over, but she shook her head. Stood. Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to speak. She took the stand, trembling as she was sworn in. Robert approached carefully. Miss Thompson, were you aware that your husband was accessing your mother's bank account? Nina's voice was barely a whisper. Not at first. When did you become aware? She took a shaky breath. About 3 weeks in. I saw a notification on his computer. I asked him, and he told me Mom had given him access. Did you believe him? A long pause. I wanted to. When did you realize he was lying? Nina's face twisted. When the officers showed up, I saw Mom's face. I knew then that she had no idea. And I realized I had been lying to myself because it was easier than confronting what Derek was doing. Did you benefit from the stolen money? Yes. Her voice broke. We paid bills with it. Bought things. I told myself it was borrowing, that we'd pay her back. But deep down, I knew it was wrong. I just didn't want to see it. Robert let the admission sit. Why didn't you stop him? Because I was scared. Nina said, tears falling. Scared of what it meant about who I married. Scared of what it meant about who I'd become. I let my mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for me, be robbed because I was too weak to stand up. The courtroom was completely silent. I'm sorry, Mom, Nina said, turning to me. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know you have no reason to forgive me, but I'm so sorry. I met her eyes. Said nothing. Sorry was just a word. Action would speak louder. Robert called me to the stand last. I walked slowly to the witness box, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth, as if I had done anything but. Robert's questions were gentle but direct. He walked me through my relationship with Nina and Derek, the pattern of financial help, the discovery of the theft, and the emotional impact. Mrs. Evelyn, why did you decide to pursue legal action rather than handling this privately? I took my time, wanting the words exactly right. Because what happened to me was not a family disagreement. It was a crime. If I had stayed silent, if I had let them sweep this under the rug for the sake of keeping the peace, I would have been telling myself that my dignity, my security, my life's work meant nothing. I would have been saying that I deserved to be used. My voice grew stronger. I spent years being generous, being the safety net. And somewhere in all that giving, they stopped seeing me as a person. They saw me as a resource. I had to take action, not just for myself, but for every other older person being taken advantage of by people they love and trust. Judge Harrison listened intently. I want my money back, I continued. But more than that, I want accountability. I want them to face real consequences, because without consequences, nothing changes. When I stepped down, the courtroom felt different. Judge Harrison reviewed her notes, then looked up. Based on the evidence presented, I'm issuing the following provisional rulings. The frozen accounts will remain frozen. Restitution to Mrs. Evelyn will begin immediately from any available funds. I'm ordering a full asset review to determine what can be liquidated to satisfy the debt. She paused, her gaze on Derek. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the criminal court with a strong recommendation for prosecution. The evidence of forgery, theft, and exploitation is overwhelming. Derek's shoulders sagged. Nina cried quietly. This court will reconvene in 30 days for sentencing recommendations on the civil side. Criminal proceedings will be scheduled separately. Judge Harrison closed her file. We're adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. It was over. At least this part was. The weeks following the hearing brought a strange kind of quiet. Not peaceful. Exactly. But the frantic chaos had settled. The legal machinery was turning. All I could do was wait and rebuild. Robert called 3 days after the hearing. The asset review is complete. Derek and Nina have agreed to surrender certain items to avoid further criminal penalties. There's a truck they purchased with your money, some electronics, and jewelry. Those will be sold and the proceeds returned to you. The house is mortgaged heavily. but there's equity that can be tapped for restitution payments. How much will I get back? I asked. Not everything. Not right away. But we're looking at about 60% within the next 6 months, and the rest in structured payments over 2 years. It's not perfect, but it's enforceable. 60%. It was more than I expected. Enough to restore some of my security. Enough to know I would not lose my independence after all. There's more, Robert continued. Derek's employer officially terminated him. Nina's been ordered by the court to find full-time employment to meet her restitution obligations. They're selling the house, moving to a smaller place, 3 towns over. I absorbed the information without satisfaction or glee. These were just facts, consequences they had earned. And the criminal case? The prosecutor is moving forward. Derek will likely face probation, community service, and a permanent record. Possibility of jail time. But given his cooperation, it might be reduced. The judge will decide next month. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table. The weight was lifted. It was not entirely gone, but it was lighter. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. We're having a little gathering this Saturday. Just neighbors. We'd love for you to come. I had not been to a neighborhood gathering in years. I had always kept to myself, not wanting to be a bother. But something had shifted. These people had shown up for me. Maybe it was time to let them in. Saturday came. I walked to Mrs. Patterson's house with a blueberry pie I had baked. The gathering was small and warm. 12 neighbors. They welcomed me. Mr. Herrera pulled me aside. Evelyn, some of us have been talking. We want to help you set up better protections. My daughter works in banking security. She'd be happy to come by. I'd appreciate that, I said, genuinely grateful. Mrs. Chen approached next. I volunteer with the senior center. They have workshops on financial safety. Maybe you'd want to attend, or even share your story. The idea of turning my pain into something useful appealed to me. I'd like that. Throughout the afternoon, people offered small kindnesses. A locksmith recommendation, an estate planning lawyer, a retired accountant offering to help reorganize my finances. I realized I had spent so much energy trying not to need anyone that I had missed the community that existed right outside my door. The following week, Mr. Herrera's daughter, Sophia, came by. She was patient and thorough. She helped me set up new banking security, biometric login, instant alerts. No one's getting into your accounts again without you knowing, she assured me. Robert helped me establish a power of attorney structure with a trusted third party, independent, with no financial incentive to exploit me. I also met with a financial advisor who helped me create a budget and savings plan. She recommended splitting my accounts, creating barriers. These were practical steps, but they felt empowering. I was not just recovering. I was building something stronger. One evening, Nina called. I almost did not answer. Mom, she said, her voice small. I'm not calling to make excuses. I just wanted you to know I got a job. Full-time. Decent pay. I'm starting therapy, too. Trying to understand how I let things get so bad. I listened without interrupting. I'm making my first restitution payment next week. It's not much, but it's a start. I know I can't fix what I did. I know I broke your trust, but I'm trying to be better. Actions matter more than words. Nina, I said quietly, show me over time. Not with apologies, but with choices. I will. Mom, I promise. After we hung up, I sat with the conversation for a long time. I did not know if Nina would follow through. I did not know if our relationship could ever be repaired. But I knew one thing: I would not let hope make me vulnerable again. I would not let love become a weapon someone could use against me. Boundaries were not cruel. They were surviving. I intended to survive with my dignity intact. 8 months later, I stood in front of a room full of people at the senior community center, my hands only slightly trembling as I held the microphone. "My name is Evelyn," I began, "and I'm here to tell you that trusting the wrong person almost cost me everything." The workshop was called Protecting Yourself: Financial Safety for Seniors. I had been invited to speak after the local news story brought attention to elder exploitation cases. 23 people filled the chairs, most my age or older, all listening with the kind of focus that told me they understood why this mattered. I shared my story. Not all the painful details, but enough to illustrate how easily it could happen. How family members can exploit trust. How important it is to keep records, set boundaries, and never feel ashamed to ask for help or take legal action. You are not being difficult when you protect yourself, I told them. You are not breaking up the family when you hold people accountable. You are simply refusing to be taken advantage of. After the workshop, several people approached me. An elderly man with kind eyes shook my hand. "Thank you. My son has been pressuring me to sign over my house." I thought I was being paranoid. "You're not paranoid," I assured him. "You're being smart." A woman my age hugged me, whispering her daughter had been draining her account, too ashamed to tell anyone. "But hearing you talk about it," she said, "I realize I don't have to carry that shame." They should. These moments made the pain worthwhile. If my story could help even one person, then something good had come from the hurt. Life had settled into a new rhythm. My finances were slowly recovering. The restitution payments came regularly, deposited on the first of each month. Nina had not missed a single payment. She called occasionally, updating me on her therapy, asking tentatively if we could have coffee. I agreed to coffee 3 months ago. It was awkward, careful, but she showed up. She listened. She did not make excuses. We were not back to where we were. Maybe we never would be. But there was something there, fragile and new, that might someday grow into trust again. Derek, on the other hand, had disappeared entirely. I heard he had moved 2 states away, taken a construction job, and barely contacted Nina anymore. She had filed for divorce. I did not waste energy thinking about him. He had made his choices. Now he lived with them. My Tuesdays and Thursdays were still spent volunteering, but now I also attended a pottery class on Wednesday evenings. The instructor was patient, and the other students were friendly. I was terrible at it. Honestly, my bowls came out lopsided. My vases collapsed. But I loved it. Something was healing about working with clay. About creating something imperfect but mine. About starting over when it did not turn out right. About the quiet satisfaction of finishing a piece and knowing I had made it with my own hands. Last week, I brought home a small, wobbly bowl glazed in blue. It sat on my kitchen table now, holding fruit. Every time I looked at it, I smiled. On a Sunday afternoon in late spring, Nina brought my granddaughter to visit. It was the first time since everything happened that I felt almost normal. We worked in the garden together, planting a row of sunflowers along the back fence. My granddaughter dug holes with her small hands, chattering. Nina worked quietly beside us, pulling weeds, respecting the boundaries I had set. When the last seed was planted, my granddaughter stood. "Grandma, will they get really tall?" "They will," I promised. "Taller than you, taller than me. They'll turn their faces to the sun and stand strong." She slipped her small hand into mine. dirt smudged on both our palms. I like that. So did I. As they left, Nina paused at the door. Thank you for letting us come. Mom. I nodded. Keep showing up, Nina. That's what matters. After they drove away, I stood in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, looking out at the garden we had planted. The house was quiet, but it was not lonely. It was peaceful. I had learned something important through all of this. You can be generous without being a doormat. You can love without losing yourself. You can forgive without forgetting the lessons that pain taught you. I am Evelyn. I am 70, and I am nobody's backup plan. I am not an endless resource. I am a woman who learned to protect her own light, to water her own garden, to stand tall like those sunflowers reaching for the sun. Sovereignty tastes like coffee in a clean mug, like a garden you tend for yourself, like a life rebuilt on your own terms. And it is worth fighting for.